The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Nyer, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC. I'll be your facilitator today for today's webinar. For those of you who are not familiar, the Virginia SBDC is the largest and most effective provider of customized counseling and education for small businesses in Virginia. Most of our services are offered locally in 28 locations throughout the Commonwealth. Today's webinar is one of our educational offerings and is part of our ongoing webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. Today's topic is the best marketing for your handmade business, taking your craft business to the web. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, a web and mobile strategist, author of So Load Mo Success, Social Media, Local and Web, Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC for having me here on the Google and Beyond Marketing and Managing on the Web series. Welcome to you all this afternoon for the best marketing for your handmade business, taking your craft business to the web. As Tracy said, there are a couple of housekeeping items. One, ask questions now. We're here, we're live for those of you who are watching live, so feel free to ask those questions. If you want to find me afterward, you can always tweet at me at W3 Consulting on Twitter. I am a fan, not necessarily a fanatic, but a fan on Twitter. So I'm always happy to answer those questions on Twitter, hashtag it Beyond Google, and I'll know what the context is. I will also have my email address on the final slide. So if you are not a Twitter user, feel free to go ahead and email me, and I will be happy to answer questions as I'm able to. And something that Tracy's doing either right now or very soon, she'll be actually sending you a link to the handouts. For those of you who will be watching the archives of this webinar, the link will be in the description of the video. So go ahead and download that, as the text of what I'll be talking about won't be displayed on screen for the entire time of our webinar today. And then finally, follow at Virginia SBDC, and their Twitter handle and their profile puts out information on new information and programs that are happening throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia that are useful to you. So it's good to pay attention to the various pieces of information they're putting out there. So with the housekeeping out of the way, let's talk about the agenda for today's webinar. Over the next hour, what we're going to be doing is talking about how to develop a marketing strategy for the custom handcrafted goods business world, how to get on the web in that sense. So I'll be talking a little bit about that topic as we make our way through. I'll also be going into the various platforms and tools that I see my own clients using to go to market with handcraft businesses. And so I'll be talking about them as I have experienced them with customers and helping them market them. So again, this is not going to be an all-encompassing webinar of all of the platforms and all their nuances. I just want to touch base on some of the pros and cons of each of the platforms from my perspective as I've seen it and the research that I've done on those platforms. I myself am not a handcrafted goods seller on any of these platforms, so I'm not going to present myself as being the end-all be-all. So I've done a lot of research into all the various experts that are out there. And so what I did was, in the resources section at the end, I've given you some links to, one, folks who are doing it well, and also an expert that I feel like you can follow and learn from to expand your knowledge on being able to sell handmade goods. And then I'll leave a couple of minutes at the end for Q&A. Feel free to answer questions throughout. Tracy will interject and ask those questions if they're pertinent in the time frame during the webinar. And then as well, at the end, if you have other questions, feel free to put them in there, and Tracy will hold those questions to the end and ask me. I'll stay as long as we need to in order to answer all of your questions live. Okay, so let's get started with the handmade crafts business or the handcraft business. There are some elements of marketing that I think it's really important for you to understand. You probably didn't go to business school and decide that you were going to start a handcraft business, so decided to go get a marketing degree. So I want to give you a little bit of background in terms of the importance of understanding marketing strategy and specifically marketing mix as it relates to what you're going to be doing, what you're going to be endeavoring if you are going to be taking handcrafted goods and putting them on the internet. So e-commerce marketing is complicated by itself, but then you take in the uniqueness of handcrafted or handmade goods and putting them onto the internet is a whole other sort of next level of being able to market. So I want to give you some foundation regarding marketing so you can start to see whether or not it's appropriate for you to even put your goods online. In 90% of the cases I see, it is, but there are some cases where it isn't, and this model, the model that I'm about to talk about a little bit, is going to be very useful to you. So let's start out with a little bit of marketing, study of marketing, some of the business stuff that happens. And I'm going to start that out with actually Philip Kotler. You probably don't know who Philip Kotler is, but Professor Kotler is an author, American marketing author, consultant, and professor. But he's known as the founder of modern marketing. He's currently the professor of marketing at Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University, and he, in I think 1960s, published the seminal textbook on marketing, and he came up with this model called the 4Ps. And while he still defends this to this day as being vital and useful in the world of marketing, there have been adaptations to the way in which we market with the advent of the internet. Obviously, since 1967, I believe it was when he published it first, things have changed. Professor Kotler is now 87, and so times have changed, things are different. But these are the 4Ps, and I just want to explain it just so you have an idea about how your goods are going to be perceived by your customers. So from this model, product, price, or cost, as well, place, and promotion are the four fundamental corners of the table, if you want to think about it that way, the foundations of how you present a product and bring it to market, right? What we call the marketing mix. So we want to think about the product that you're providing, the price of that product, where the product is going to be sold, and then how to promote that product. Now, again, Professor Kotler fully defends this as still being useful even to this day, and I think it's important to understand it. So you should go out there and do a little bit of research on it. But the idea today is that there's been kind of a fundamental shift to a more consumer or customer focused way of the marketing mix. And so today we traditionally use what's called the 4Cs. And the 4Cs are basically the customer consumer value that they perceive of your product, the cost of the product itself, that is in essence what I'm paying in terms of a price as a consumer, the convenience of accessing that product, and then finally the communications that happen between the seller and the buyer. So how is the brand communicating with me as a consumer along that product chain, right? From manufacturing or product conception to manufacturing to distribution to purchase. And so when you start a handmade business, you are controlling all of those pieces that in many other businesses that's not the case. If you're manufacturing everything that's happening because you're making it all, that means you're sourcing the goods, that means you're dealing with the manufacturing process, fulfillment, delivery, all customer service. All of it is on you now to be able to manage all of those pieces. And so the 4Cs really gives you a fundamental way to look at all this. There's a wonderful diagram that's been created by marketingmix.co.uk, and I feel like this really helps explain some of these pieces. And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but I just want to make sure that you're aware of these pieces. But in essence, what you're doing is looking at your product and you're saying, is the product fulfilling the want or need, or wants and or needs of my customer? Okay. And in traditional 4Cs thought, you would actually develop the product after only looking at the wants and needs. Some of you who are watching and listening may already have a product that you're creating, and you know that is already the case for people. Now you have to figure out whether or not there are people not just locally who you're selling to, but also nationally and internationally that would be willing to buy through the internet without having touched the product, right? Because if you're selling online, the person has not yet experienced the product, or maybe they have experienced it in some way, shape, or form because they met you in person at maybe a pop-up or at a farmer's market or something, and now they're willing to buy from you on the other side. But you need to really think about that structure of have they experienced the product, and will they buy something that is a handmade, unique product that they haven't yet experienced in real life. Art buying is one of those exceptions to the rule, right? Where you need to really work hard at getting people to experience your art, and then they'll buy online, right? But there needs to be, especially high-end art. And in my particular example here, high-end art is very difficult to sell online without someone having already met the artist or seen the art physically in real life. So how do you reduce the barrier to entry for folks who are willing to buy such a unique handmade product, right? So that might mean selling postcards, printed prints, smaller prints, and other kinds of things that are unique but are low cost of entry for someone, that then gets them to experience that in some way, shape, or form, get to have a relationship with you, and then you can go ahead on to get them to buy a higher end piece of work from you down the road. So that's where cost comes into play, right? Cost is, are the things that the consumer that the consumer's buying, are they perceiving the cost too high or too low for the value of what they're getting? Okay, so really think about that value proposition. Communications, of course, is what we're going to be talking about, which is really all of the marketing and customer service interactions that you have, and then of course convenience. And today, with the internet and more specifically the World Wide Web, we have the ultimate convenience of being able to access millions and millions of products by a click of a button. And so the convenience factor is not so much an issue as your discussion with the buyer about how you are manufacturing those goods so that they can receive them on the other end. And many times we come across conflicts in how to overcome these various parts. And what I typically say to especially new handcraft goods sellers is that you need to start becoming creative with regard to these. The number one example of problems in identifying the right product for to start online is, well, my cost of goods sold. What I'm going to be producing online doesn't match the price that I'm seeing other sellers sell my types of goods out there for. So you need to get creative. And so an example, like I just said, of the cost of goods sold is too high for me to make a profit online. Well, the reality is that then you need to get creative and start thinking about this. Other sellers have had the same problem time immemorial. So what do? Traditionally, what they do is they go out and get wholesale pricing from their source products. So if you're buying paper or you're buying other types of materials, go out to those vendors and find those suppliers that will give you wholesale pricing that will ultimately reduce your total cost of goods sold so that you're able to then profit from that. But another solution might be that you raise your price, right? Go to the luxury market, and that means you're going to sell less at more, but you're going to inevitably make the same amount or even an exponential amount of more money, because people tend to see higher price as being a factor of greater quality, but also a better customer service experience. So provide fewer people with more bespoke, that is customized, tailored, personalized experience. It doesn't have to be a tailored, customized product even, but just a tailored, customized experience. And then you get a better, more profitable, or that is a profitable business out the gate. So start to think about the problems that you might perceive going online, which is everybody can price match and find your product or something very similar for lower cost, and start thinking about how you're going to raise the value of it through pricing, through lowering costs, because you can find, you can do a Google search for the supplies you need, and you could probably find it cheaper somewhere else. I know that there are certain products. I know I worked with one particular client where the nature of the product required a very specific supplier and very specific materials, and that presented a challenge, but we eventually overcame it through some creative thinking. So just really start to think about those things. Okay, so with that out of the way, what I wanted to talk now about was some of the elements of creating your marketing strategy, and it really comes into thinking about the business that you're going into. Number one, are you going into business for primary income? That is, are you going to business full time? And if you are, then that's going to make a decision whether or not if you're doing it part time, you just want to make a few extra bucks, and so you throw up an Etsy shop and go to town, you're probably going to be okay because you don't have to think about this as being your livelihood. But if this is going to be your livelihood, then you're gonna want to stick with us for the rest of this webinar as we talk about those pros and cons of each of the platforms and what they really mean for you to be able to build a sustainable business, not just sustainable from a profitability perspective, but from a life-work balance perspective, because you don't want to be working, 80, 90-hour work weeks because you're not capable of fulfilling product needs or making the sales to match those kinds of things. All right, so next up is what's your budget and what's your timeline, right? Do you have a current budget for being able to go to market? And if you don't, then handmade crafts sounds like a really low barrier to entry business for a full-time business. It's not. So you really need to understand what your budget is, because each of these platforms is going to come with its own costs, and you need to be able to fulfill large orders sometimes very quickly, and that means having enough inventory. So again, every one of your businesses is different, so I don't want to make too many big, sort of broad statements here, but just remember that you need to know what your budget is, that if you for some reason get 100 new orders tomorrow because of a fluke of nature, your product gets seen on national television show because of good public relations, or you get picked up in an article in the newspaper, or a particular influencer shows your product on their Instagram feed, and all of a sudden you get all these orders. If you don't fulfill them, it will be worse for you marketing wise than you getting an order a day that you can fulfill for the next 30 days. Okay. So just make sure that you know what your budget is, because you need to be prepared for those kinds of inherent costs, which means you may need to go to your bank and get a line of credit or get a credit card that allows you to be able to quickly deal with those kinds of unknowns. And then your timeline, right? What's the timeline for you to be going into and onto the web? That gives you a better idea about how quickly certain things need to be set up, and whether or not you're going to leverage multiple platforms. Many online handmade businesses will go ahead and be on multiple platforms, and we'll talk a little bit about that near the end. What skills do you have? What skills do you need? And what skills do you need a professional for as it relates to your handmade business? And this comes down to your overall curiosity with life, I suppose, right? You probably have some requisite set of skills. For example, if you're selling printed stationery and you're a graphic designer, well, those two lend well to each other because you probably know CMYK values. You can work with a printer. You can understand the design and layout of the stationery and printed paper choices and all of those things, right? You have all the requisite skills that you need to be able to launch that business pretty quickly. You're going to be able to at least understand designing a website. You're going to understand how to lay out your products and all of those kinds of things. But you may not be that great a copywriter, so you may need to lend on the services of a copywriter in order to write the right product stories for the stationery. And you may need someone who has the technical capabilities of working on a website that you don't have. So start thinking about those things, because those are going to then backfill into your budget as well as your timeline. If you don't have the time to work on those things, you don't have time to learn the skills to make those things happen, and or you then need to hire someone, and that person is going to take time as well to get those things done, then you're going to need to work those things out. So I really, before you even get to marketing, you really need to understand some of these fundamentals of getting the marketing foundation in place. You're going to need at least a website, and you're going to need to have imagery of your products. So how are you going to get those things done? Do you have the photography skills? If you don't have the photography skills, then you need to learn them. That's as easy as a YouTube search and some and time. But you need to do it, right? And so you need to go ahead and buffer some time in for it. If you're going to do some really high-end luxury products, that means you may need to set up a photo studio, a photo booth, right, in your home or in a studio, and you're going to need to learn how to, purchase the right equipment, get all of that together. If you're going to have a handmade business that's supported by a blog or a podcast, well, How much time and effort is it going to take for you to be able to build a following and get those things implemented? You need to start thinking through those pieces, because that's going to help inform the timeline. I just wanted to kind of give you some of those ideas. Next up is just some of the top points of what's important for once you do get the platforms up and running. And like I said, we're going to talk about the platforms, but I wanted to get these things out of the way because I think they're important. One is that SEO matters everywhere that you're going to place your product. So when you whatever platform you choose, whatever way in which you plan to get your product in front of people, understand that if there are a place for product descriptions, you need to have product descriptions with appropriate keywords for the things that people search for to find your product. You may have a very unique product, and unfortunately, Google doesn't care, right? Google cares about putting the most relevant information to match the intent of the potential buyer. So when it comes to Google, or really some of these platforms that have marketplaces, your real goal is to be able to put the keywords in place that when someone does a search for the thing that they're looking for, your product can be represented well so that it shows, and then from there it entrees them into potentially buying something that was unique, but it has to be relatable to something. So uniqueness is important, but when it comes to SEO, being found is just as important. So you have to balance out what keywords you use, the ones that people will use to find your product, versus the uniqueness of your product and selling them once they've seen it. Right? So it's not so easy for me to say, well, be broad in your keyword terms so that you're caught in more search terms. It's about being specific enough that people don't find your product via a search word and say, why would I at all want this as coming up in my search words? Why would they put this term for me to find them? Versus putting the right terms so that the right type of audience would be able to see it, right? And I'm not going to give any examples because we'll just go down a rabbit hole there. But I hope you understand my point, and feel free to ask clarifying questions and email me if you have any specific product questions regarding SEO. But basically, search engine optimization is the need for putting the right keywords into your images, into the product descriptions, especially on platforms that give you keyword fields like Etsy. You want to make sure that you put the right keywords in there as well. Next up is, if you have your own website, or if you're using an e-commerce platform, then you need to make sure that you are feeding. There's something called a product feed that your web platform should provide, that then feeds it into Google Shopping. You get access to that by going into the Google Merchant Center. And again, you could just Google these two terms and you'll be able to find all the information you need. But the Google Merchant Center is where you will access the dashboard for being able to, you'll find your product feed on your e-commerce site somewhere, or you'll have to have one created. And what it does is it takes all of the stuff that is about your product name, description, your any color variations or options that are available, maybe sizes of the shirts that you're selling, the amount of inventory you have available, and it feeds it into Google so that when someone types in, my typical example is men's shoes, I type in men's shoes, and Google is now going to show me a listing of all of the available men's shoes that I can buy, where someone has provided a product feed. And so if I have a local store where someone's making handmade shoes, a handmade cobbler, or a cobbler that is, and I'm finding those options, I wouldn't find it if that cobbler was not feeding into Google Shopping. So it's really important that you get into Google Merchant Center. Some platforms have access to it, some don't. Nothing I can do about that. But the point is that Google Shopping opens you up to a much wider audience than just being available in any one specific marketplace or platform. Okay, so product descriptions need to be very detailed. Okay, and I'm going to get to this further in just a moment, but my point is that when you produce handmade goods, you need to make sure that people know how long it's going to take to make it, right? So if you're making something custom, every time someone makes an order, you're putting in a custom item so that you're not holding inventory. Then you need to make sure people know that it's going to take 4 weeks from the time of purchase before they can get access to that product, before it even gets shipped. Or if you decide to go on vacation, well, maybe there's going to be, 2 weeks away from vacation, then another 2 weeks for you to kind of work on the back order of those products that have been sold in the interim. Put those in your product descriptions. Make sure you're over communicating those in the product descriptions and keeping those updated. It's so important to be clear and updated in the product descriptions, especially when it comes to handmade goods, because that's going to keep people knowing. Especially, I like the idea of like seeing a time and date when you updated the product description, just so people know you were on top of your game when it comes to letting them know about those things, because then they can see, okay, yeah, it's going to take 4 more weeks for me to get the particular bow that I saw that was really cute for my niece. But her birthday's not for another 3 months. No big deal. I still want to buy it now, get it out of the way, and then it'll ship and I'll receive it. So obviously the faster turnaround time is going to be better for most people, but understand that if you're clear and if the people know that you're being timely with updating the product descriptions and your inventory, and your inventory generally, then they're going to be more likely to buy. This leads me to my next point, which is that every product that you put on your store must have a story. I know this is the most difficult thing, because if you decide to have dozens and dozens of products, then this becomes quite a bit of a chore. But the reality is that if your product doesn't have a story, it will sell less. And this works more or less, for more commodity products. This doesn't matter as much, right? Buying toilet paper, it doesn't matter if your toilet paper has a story, right? I don't care if the pulp for my toilet paper was sourced from X location or Y location, as long as it works, then I will, and it's at a good price, right? It's a commodity, so I'm going to end up buying the toilet paper, for different reasons. But for your business, where handmade, knowing that it's made by a craftsperson, typically by someone who I have gotten to know or I've learned about, your product's unique and interesting, well, so does the story. The story behind your product needs to be just as interesting, and it needs to tie back to the brand story, right? So if you are someone who has created the brand story, and I hope that you are, if you haven't, then now is the time to do that, right? What is the story behind your brand? Why did you start this business? And what is the business all about? Well, each product needs to fit within that story. What's the history behind why you created this product? What was your inspiration? Was it inspired by a notable person? Was it inspired by an event? Was it inspired by a problem that you had? If you're one of the mom makers, right, and you had an experience with your child and said, oh, you know what, I could make this product and it will be really helpful to other moms. So you made this. That's the story you tell for the product. Put that in the product description, and Google and the other search engines eat that stuff up, because now you have a story with vitality, with an ability to be expressive and bring people into the buying journey. I can't stress enough how important product stories are. Finally, I know that lots of people want to promote widely, okay, and they put their products everywhere, and that ends up becoming a bit of a pain point for many handmade businesses. So I generally recommend that you have a central point of sale and that you use the different platforms for being able to promote the business. I have no problem with that, but trying to limit the number of places where people can buy so that you're not having the confusion of inventory management. And I'll show some tools at the end where you can deal with some of this, but many times the big problem is that you get orders for the same product that's unique in two different places, and usually it happens right at the same time, and so then now you are scrambling to figure out how to deal with who gets that product, and then having to turn back and say to somebody, well, I only had one piece of this artwork and now I need to sell it to this person, so would you like to buy something else? And that's not a good experience for anybody. So make sure that you either know how to centralize your inventory management so that you're pulling from one pool of inventory for different places, or you're updating very, very quickly, or limit the number of points of sale so that you're not having that problem as much as you would otherwise. Okay, so a couple of other things. One is that no matter what I talk about here, I cannot overcome crappy products. Okay, so good marketing and great marketing is totally wonderful for use on products that people find value in. But if your product is garbage, then people are going to have poor experiences, and no amount of marketing is going to be able to cover that. Okay, so as we continue along, I just have to put out that disclaimer. If your product is low quality and its price is a luxury product, and you try to market it, it's going to probably fail, and there's no level of marketer that's going to be able to overcome that. All right. So get your product to a point where you feel very comfortable with selling it, and then sales become easier because you can rest on that confidence. 2 is get your platform and tools in place before you start the whole marketing and promotions process. So in most cases, you want to give yourself about 6 to 8 weeks of lead time so that you can get your platform in place. You can build up a little bit of inventory of product, and you can start to get your social and other marketing campaigns underway, and then you can open the floodgates to letting people know that your products are available for sale. So that's a gross estimate, but a good sort of estimate to kind of think about. Make sure that you create your offline digital promotion and content strategy in Confluence. You really don't want to be thinking about these as different pieces. So remember that you might meet someone at a farmer's market or at a pop-up shop, or through a gallery showing or something like that, and then by having met them, they will then convert because you gave them a postcard, you gave them a rack card or a business card, and now they go to your website or they go to your Etsy shop, and now they buy from you from the offline component. So there's quite a number of opportunities for you to be able to use offline to digital and content strategy, but you need to think about those things together. For example, I go back to kind of art, because art businesses are a good way to think about this. If I'm going to buy a piece of art, I am going to I'm not going to buy it the moment I see it. I'm a wait and hold kind of person, and I want to see whether or not that piece of artwork is going to look good in the place that I'm going to display it. I'm going to think about the cost and whether or not that piece of artwork is going to increase in value over time. I'm going to think about all of those things because I'm a savvy art buyer. But most people are very emotional about those things, and maybe you have a piece of artwork that's low priced and a good value, and people will impulsively buy it right on the spot, or impulsively buy it when they're scrolling through their Instagram feed. Totally understandable. You need to think about those things, though, as you move forward. Is your offline is your offline marketing something that informs the online purchases, and how does that impact your business? Okay, wanted to talk about the fashion marketing cycle. So you should always run your marketing campaigns in 6-week cycles. This is the Goldilocks zone of timing, and I can't get into all the particulars here, but fashion runs in pretty much 6-week cycles, right? Every 6 weeks we have a new season that comes out. They come out on the stands. You see the runway shows. All of that stuff is happening in these cycles. They're planned usually year and a half, maybe sometimes 2 years in advance, and you see that the clothing is expiring in terms of its kind of life cycle, so to speak, and we don't need to worry about that so much. But what I'm more concerned about you doing is that you're looking at the calendar and seeing what's happening in the calendar, and when are you marketing your products to ramp up for sales. And so you can look at the various, there's a holiday for everything, right? And if nothing else, you have the 4 seasons, right? Fall, winter, spring, and summer. And you should be making sure that you're driving traffic to your products based on its seasonality, as well as on your specific marketing campaigns. So if you have a product that's really great for, maybe you have handcrafted pens and pencils, well, you have the upcoming school season, right? So back to school season is going to be a marketing campaign, and you should understand the 6 weeks that flow on top of that cycle. And you can go to your local convenience store or local department store, and you will see them start to put back to school stuff out at a particular time, and then they will take it down at a particular time. Don't try and reinvent the marketing strategy here. Look at what those stores are doing and match those stores and cycles, because they have spent a lot of time and money to research when people are buying. And if you just match yourself to those, then you'll be better off at selling as well. So look at those industries, look at those markets, and sell accordingly. I always say to handmade goods businesses, you need to be different. You need to be unique, and that is absolutely 100% true. But you also have to balance out product fulfillment and quality. So creating potentially customized, unique goods for everyone, that is, say, personalizing things. If that's your business, if you are putting engraving names on particular products, and that's your whole business, I totally get it. But in terms of being able to get products sold, you need to be able to manufacture them on a consistent basis with the level of quality that your customers are going to want. So just remember, you have to kind of balance those out. You want to be unique, and your product should absolutely be unique, but it should also be replicable so that you can get them out the door. If it takes you a very long time to create a product, then you have to increase the price, and that might push you over the customer threshold for what they might pay reasonably. Okay, so I have no problem with luxury goods, but there comes to be a point where an iPhone case for $30,000, because it takes you a whole year to make it, is not going to be useful to you. No one's going to buy that, or very few people on the planet are going to buy that. So it's not useful to you. So start to think, what's a reasonable price? You know that we have cases on the market, an iPhone case that's wooden and that's fully customized and all that fun stuff. Maybe it takes you a couple of weeks to make that happen, curing the wood and then doing all the things necessary to make it happen. Great. Well, you're going to price it at that level, but you also need to figure out what's the process in place to make that happen so that you can price it effectively and market it effectively. Also, don't think that again, this goes back to like your offline marketing stuff, but your farmers markets, your pop-up shops, and other offline marketing, don't think that this all has to be all or nothing, that you're going to go to e-commerce and then never look back at the farmers markets. I found that the best businesses are the ones that have an in-person kind of tribe that buys their products in person and then refers those products for people who don't live in the area outside of that region, right? So if you really love this handmade, baby clothing line that you see at the farmers market every weekend, and you can only buy so much baby clothes, right? You will then go ahead and refer to your other friends and family to buy those products, and that's where the e-commerce solution is going to be your best sales tool. So you need to make sure that you balance those out so that you decide, oh, now all of a sudden, you have your e-commerce and you decide to forego going to the farmer's market, but that's where your tribe was seeing you every weekend, or at least seeing your products every weekend, because it doesn't have to be you there at the farmer's market or at the pop-up shops. And now, once that's gone, it's out of sight and out of mind, and so the referrals dry up. So you really need to think about how your offline stuff is really working to your advantage or to your disadvantage. All right, at this point, I'm going to go over these different platforms: Etsy, Amazon, Shopify, Instagram, I said Shopify twice, Big Cartel, and then launching your own website. So I'm going to hop out of here and go through what I think are some of the pros and cons of each of these platforms, which will hopefully help you better make a better choice as you're kind of making your way along. So let's start first with Etsy. So Etsy is kind of the gorilla in the room, or the elephant in the room, in terms of online handmade crafts. For a lot of people, Etsy is the easy solution. It's a great place to get started. There's a low barrier to entry. It's low cost. You can join without paying the monthly fee and just pay 20 cents per product that you sell, and obviously the pricing can change and all that other stuff. So I'm not going to say what their fees are now, but they're relatively low, and there is a marketplace. So this is kind of one of the first differentiators that you need to decide on when you choose a platform. Are you going to go to a platform like Etsy where you hope that by putting your products on here and them being unique, that the people who already buy on Etsy are going to find your product and buy your product because they buy on Etsy? Now, there are a couple of good things about that, right? You have a ready group of people who buy handmade items, and so they're there. You need to, of course, be good at optimizing your Etsy page for being able to be found, but in many ways, you could potentially not do any other marketing and still make sales. You're not going to be able to, leave your day job by doing that. So that's much more a part-time thing. But then that becomes the double-edged sword, which is that you have to market your Etsy page as you would your own website, and you have to do all of the work necessary to drive traffic to Etsy, and that requires you marketing and having an effective marketing strategy to drive people to Etsy, because Etsy can't support you. You're going to need to drive enough potential buyers to Etsy, and then Etsy captures them as buyers, these people who were not on Etsy already, and then they are then potentially going to undercut you by showing other Etsy products that people would want instead of yours. So there goes the con of it, right? So you can easily get lost in the shuffle, you can easily be undercut by Etsy sellers, and you don't have a lot of control over your brand. One of the things here, we'll go to one of these products. If we click on Stanley the Squirrel Lamb's Wool, here, you can see that this particular buyer, just at random, she has an Etsy shop here, and we're on a specific product, and we're just going to click on her shop itself. So we're going to go back out to her shop, and you can see that she doesn't have an image displayed for herself here. She has a few products, and it looks like she's has about 60 items, and it's pretty sparse. Now you have the option of having a banner up here, and just from looking at many different Etsy shops, I always say to people, either have it if it works for you, or just get rid of it and don't have it at all. Because the reality is that many times it takes up a lot of space, and if it's useless space, then you don't really want to be taking up space that's going to be otherwise showing your product. So if it works for you, it works for you. If it looks good, it looks good. But if it, for any reason, is not going to look good, get rid of it. And then finally, one of the other cons of Etsy is that it can be a death by a thousand cuts, because the small fees, as you aggregate in terms of the volume of products you sell, then Etsy can become pretty expensive. So you need to then average that with either paying the monthly fee to reduce the per item cost and figure that out. So there comes a point where you're selling so much on Etsy that you have a following already that would buy from you whether or not you were on Etsy, and is that the time that you would then hop over to another platform? I do want to talk very briefly about the Etsy team. So Etsy has this program called Teams, or Etsy Teams, and you can create a team, and it's a way for you to join a group of other sellers to collaborate in terms of all kinds of things. So here on the Etsy Help Center, if you go to help.etsy.com, you can look at what all the teams are about and how you get it going, and team captains and team leaders and all of that other fun stuff, and see whether a team is right for you. And that can help you stabilize your business and ramp it up pretty quickly if you're a part of a team, and so on and so forth. So consider and think about teams and whether or not they're useful. I've heard good experiences and bad experiences, just like with any sort of working in a group environment. Some people are going to hold their pull their weight, and some people are not, and you need to make that decision as to whether you join a team or not on Etsy. Okay, next up is the Amazon Handmade, and Amazon Handmade can be found by going to services.amazon.com/handmade/handmade.html. Okay, and so, or you could just Google it and you'll be able to find Amazon Handmade. So Amazon Handmade is obviously Amazon. So you get the potential 250 million plus customers that buy internationally on Amazon. And it shows up just like any other category on Amazon. So when people are buying on Amazon, they just do a search, and if your product shows up, then voila, people are capable of buying it. You have platform support, so if you get accepted into the Handmade program, then you have people who are there to help you. They give you online phone and email support, and they also handle fulfillment if you want. So that means that you ship Amazon your handmade products in bulk. They hold them in inventory in their warehouses, and then they deliver them. So they handle payment, processing, they handle fulfillment for you. And of course, that means they're going to take more money from your from your sales. So be aware that then your product becomes a necessity to be sold in high volume in order for it to be useful. Some cons. One is not everyone is accepted into the Amazon Handmade program. You have to apply for the program, and then they will hopefully accept you, but they don't accept everyone. I don't remember what the percentages are of the number of people who apply to being accepted. I'm not sure that information is published, but the reality is that you get a you get a rejection and you're done. You can't really do much more. There's not really much of an appeals process. You can apply again, but the reality is that they hold the reins on whether or not you can go onto the platform. The other thing with Amazon Handmade that I've heard is that on Amazon Handmade, product feedback is one, sparse. So people don't leave as many reviews on Amazon Handmade as they are otherwise. And it seems to me that Amazon Handmade doesn't make a very clear distinction that this is a handmade product. And so people just presume that it has the same feel as high scale manufactured products or enterprise manufactured products. So their reviews tend to be a little bit more, or basically a little less forgiving. So you'll get worse reviews for the same product that, say, on Etsy or on another platform, you would get a better response. So keep that in mind. Next up is Shopify. Shopify is an e-commerce platform, so it's not specifically related to handmade goods, but it allows you to create a really quick e-commerce site where you can sell products. And the benefits of Shopify: super simple to set up, and it gives you all of the integrations with many other tools. And you can see that if you go on here, you have integration with Facebook and Pinterest and Facebook Messenger. You can even push to Amazon, eBay, and other places. And you can see that they have a huge resources database where it gives you all of this information about how to sell online. They themselves are a little university, a free university of information. So even if you use another one of the platforms, the Shopify resources section is phenomenal. Their fee structure is pretty reasonable, so you're not going to break the bank in terms of selling on Shopify, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. You've got templates, you've got access to being able to modify those templates, and they give you a free 14-day trial, so that's not so bad, with no risk. So you can kind of check that out. The cons is that Shopify is not a marketplace for handmade goods, so you're not going to be able to really bring sales to the environment by putting your product on here. You have to do all of your marketing on your own. Next up, also with Shopify, you can think about it from the perspective that you're going to be locked into the platform, right? Once you start paying for Shopify, you have to keep paying for it, otherwise they take your shop down. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. The next thing I wanted to talk about was actually the idea of selling through social media. And there have been a couple of products, and this is the only one that I've seen work well enough that I'm willing to recommend it. But the idea here is that you have Instagram, you have Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, and so on and so forth, and you are posting each of your custom products that you're making as you're making them, photographing them, and then placing them onto social media. Then someone comes along, the people that you have built a following who are following your product or searching for your types of products, they say they want it, and then they express interest in buying it, and then you send them a link to be able to pay and buy. The standard example is that you go on Instagram, you see a product, and then you type your email address into one of the comments of Instagram, then the seller, you, the handmade goods seller, you then send an invoice through PayPal to the potential buyer. They pay for it. Then in the comments of the Instagram feed, you place some kind of comment to let people know that this product has been sold, and then you fulfill the order. So you go ahead and ship that off to the person who completed the invoice first. And so that's how it's done. That is, of course, super easy. It's relatively, low fees because all you're paying for is PayPal, or whatever the processing fee is for these platforms, and then your time to fulfill the order. However, it is labor intensive, of course, because you're spending all of that time monitoring your feeds, building all of the community necessary to support the sale, and it's only seen on those platforms. So it's not seen on the broader Google platform. And there are obviously lots of room for errors. So if you mistype an email address, then you have to redo that work. If you, for some reason, send an email invoice out to someone and they don't pay, then you have to follow up with them, and that's all kinds of labor and time and error prone. There, like I said, there are these platforms that are coming up. Spreezy is one of them, and so Spreezy is really quite interesting here. So the idea is that, like I said, you have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, and you then are able to push your products out to your, say, your Instagram feed, your Facebook page, Twitter, and Pinterest. And then what the user experiences is that they comment with their email address on one of these posts that Spreezy has enabled, and then they get a checkout link via email. So they immediately get an email, and then they fill out their shopping cart information. Spreezy does inventory management and options for the various products. So if you have a t-shirt in multiple sizes with different colors, now Spreezy can give people those options to select on their side. The order's fulfilled, and then Spreezy automatically responds and comments into that feed to tell people that the product is no longer available. And it even does abandoned cart saving. You can do discount codes to offer customers discounts. Really, really powerful tool. Plus, it's collecting email addresses. So when people put an email and then type in subscribe or something like that, then people are able to subscribe to your email list. So you're building an email list that, say, is a little bit more difficult on Etsy or other platforms. So very cool product there. You can manage it through a mobile app. So Spreezy is definitely worth checking out. Next up is Big Cartel. Big Cartel is all about being super easy. And so it gives you a free starter program that's 5 products for free. It's just free. You set it up. It has very limited availability in terms of other options, and you're given 5 images per product, and you can pretty much get your Big Cartel site up and running in under an hour. Okay, so if you have all the parts, so it's supposed to be simple, right? With simplicity comes limitations, right? Without upgrading, you have a .bigcartel.com domain, which is a big no-no in my book. You should always have a domain you control. So you should make sure that you use a domain for representing yourself, and then forwarding people to Big Cartel, so that no matter what, if you decide to change or move to another platform, you're capable of protecting your brand. And Big Cartel does have a lot of limitations. Even at its highest level, you're still only allowed 5 images per product, and there is just not a lot you can do with the platform. But again, if you are technologically challenged and you don't have a lot of time and you just want to get a very simple site up, Big Cartel will work. Okay, and of course, you're locked into the platform. This leads me to my kind of last thought here, and then I'm going to run through some of my final thoughts about the other tools. Is that you can, if you already have a website up and running, say a WordPress website, which is the platform we develop on at W3 Consulting, and the one that I most often recommend, is that when you can immediately enable selling online through a free plugin that's also produced by the same people who produce WordPress Automatic, called WooCommerce. And so it's a free plugin, but for most of the features you're probably going to want to pay for their plugins or support or upgraded package. And I forget what the price is, but it's fairly nominal. And you pay this one, like I think it's a one-time fee or whatever, and you have it for a lifetime, or you can pay the annual fee. And now with WooCommerce, you're capable of enabling e-commerce on your WordPress website. So it's a very, very powerful tool with a lot of the functions that you would want. So it provides you ultimate flexibility and extensibility, because you can just add on all kinds of features. You're not limited by the number of products you can have, or the number of photographs, or the way in which you display things. It's just real complete control over not only sales, but also your customer marketing data, right? Because all of these other platforms, they're now holding your customer marketing data. And with GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations in the EU, as well as the California data privacy laws that are coming into effect soon, all of these things are now holding your customer data, and you're still responsible for those things. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. Another one of the real great benefits is that there is a lower cost typically over the long term if you host your own website, because you will have aggregated all of the upfront costs with setup, and then presumably over the long term, you're going to have lower costs because you're just maintaining what you already have built. Of course, one of the big drawbacks is it takes time and energy, time and resources to be able to get the site up and running. So just something to keep in mind. WordPress and WooCommerce, I have seen many, many handmade businesses do really great work with being able to set those up, because they have not just that they're selling, but maybe they're selling services along with their handmade business, and that can be really useful. I wanted to talk about just two more tools, and then I'll go back to the slides and talk about a couple other things, and then we'll close out. But so quickly, Oberlo, if you do have a handmade business and you are using Shopify, Oberlo is a plugin that allows you to import drop shipped items. In essence, products that you are not creating yourself from other sources like AliExpress and other kinds of places that mass produce products and source them into your store automatically. So specifically Shopify. And if you want to be able to have a wide variety of products in addition to your own handmade goods, Oberlo is something you might want to look at. Also, and last of these sites I'm going to show you is Facebook Marketplace. So Facebook has a marketplace built into the platform where you can sell anything. As you can see here, I have, in Arlington, Virginia, I have 60 miles, and you can see all the various products that people are selling through here. So you can buy products and sell products on Facebook. You click on sell something, a little pop-up thing comes here, click on items for sale, and then you go through the process of listing your handmade goods. So again, it's another place where you can promote your products and potentially sell. This is primarily for local sales, and certainly something to look at. There are lots of pros and cons to Facebook Marketplace, but I did want you to know that it existed. All right, so let me go back to my slides here just ever so briefly, a couple of things. Let me go through this. Sorry, didn't jump to the slides here. So I talked about Facebook Marketplace. There's eBay and Craigslist. Certainly keep that in mind. And also there are apps that allow you to sell through their particular app. So Letgo is one of them that allows you to be able to place products on there. I've not seen a lot of handmade businesses doing this, but it's certainly intriguing to me, the idea of publishing your products to mobile applications that are marketplaces by themselves. It'd be like if Craigslist was a mobile app, or Craigslist does have a mobile app, but the idea of being in an app where people are buying and selling just directly on their phone, kind of like a strip mall for your phone. Or you can develop your own app. So if you have your own following and your own people who are always buying from you, maybe having your own app then brings the mobile first millennial buyer into the fold. Okay. As I close out, I know we're running up on time. I just wanted to point out some resources for you to be able to check out. One is if you follow Evan and Caitlin on YouTube, they are a husband and wife team that produce their own products, and they show people how they create them, and they've just done a really fantastic job of marketing themselves using social media as well as their website, and building a following both of selling their products but also selling how they create their products. So check out Evelyn and Caitlin on YouTube to see a handmade goods business that's prospering and how they do it, and they look like they're having fun while they're doing it anyway. If you're looking for a real expert who is actually in the handmade business, you can check out the resources on cupcaketrainings.com. Once it was called richmombusiness.com, and now it's cupcaketrainings.com. But Renee Christine is the purveyor of that business, and even for you guys out there who have handmade goods, I suggest you following Renee and checking out what she's doing both on YouTube. She's still at Rich Mom Business on YouTube, but I recommend checking her out and learning from her and her whole community, the community she calls her besties. So she's a really great resource for following and learning more information. Again, in the handout, you have a list of all of these things, but I wanted to make a very brief caveat here. If you're going to sell online, then you need to be very aware of these coupon browser plugins. So for me as a buyer, both for my business and personally, I love these things. These are fantastic. I can use all of these various tools for being able to find coupons, to price comparison different products across the internet, and so on and so forth. But you as an e-commerce seller now, remember that if you put out a discount code and it becomes available online in some way, shape, or form, it will then get picked up by these aggregators, and you may lose huge amounts of profit by using discount and coupon codes. So my only point is that if you're going to use coupon codes or discounts, just be aware that there are tools like this that are available that can potentially ruin your business. Okay, so be aware. And finally, Craft Count, ShipStation, and Stitch Labs are three resources I just recommend checking out. Craft Count is an Etsy-based information site that shows the top X of sales for businesses that are over 1,000 sales. So you can kind of get a litmus test of how much is selling in particular product categories. ShipStation and Stitch Labs are if you are selling on multiple platforms. Say you're selling on Amazon, eBay, and Etsy at the same time. Well, ShipStation allows you to handle delivery management and printing labels and all that other fun stuff. And Stitch Labs handles inventory management across all of those. So you can actually sell on multiples without having that double buy problem that I talked about earlier. So I'm going to have Tracy go ahead and close us out. I'll be happy to stay on for Q&A if we have any questions, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Ray, and thank you everyone for participating today. Today's webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow you'll be receiving a follow-up email on this webinar, and there'll be an evaluation link in that email. Please help us to continue to improve our webinars by filling out that email, or that survey. I've also posted it in the chat window now if you want to do it right now. Please join us on July 26th for All About Domains. And so we do have one question at this point, Ray. What are your thoughts on Squarespace's e-commerce? We've started our website on their platform and are just started to sell through them.
So Squarespace is a very competent platform for websites. I have seen businesses that have been able to put inventory on their site and use their e-commerce solution. Unfortunately, I've not had that many businesses that I've experienced use Squarespace to be able to comment thoroughly. Of the few that I've seen and that I've been able to log in and play around with, the inventory management functions are limited. The ability to be able to be found on Google is a benefit, but I generally would say that you want a separate solution if you're going to have a lot of inventory. Again, Squarespace or any of these other tools. So I can parse it out. Etsy and Shopify are good because Etsy can export inventory to Shopify. Shopify has an export functionality, but the other platforms traditionally do not. And so if you don't host your own website with your own inventory management, then you're kind of trapped. So if you end up having a lot of products and a lot of product history in a particular platform like Squarespace, it's going to be a manual process to move that out. If you have a low amount of profit inventory, and it's not that big of a deal that you're going to lose it when you change platforms, all the better. And say you plan on being with Squarespace forever. Squarespace is around in 15, 20 years, you're going to still be using it. Great, that's totally fine, and you're good to go. I would make sure, again, that you are capable of being put into the Google Shopping through your product feeds on Squarespace. I actually don't know if that's the case. And if not, then you need to figure out a solution to be able to do that, and then making sure that their SEO for their inventory management matches the SEO for Squarespace version 7, so that you're making sure that the products are being seen and indexed by Google effectively.
Great, thanks, Ray. What are your thoughts on selling on your own site, but the sale going through PayPal, thus moving the customer temporarily off your site? Is it too cumbersome? I find it to be lacking branding, difficult for the customer to send a note with the purchase, etc.
So PayPal has multiple different ways in which you can actually purchase. What you're talking about is the non-business version of PayPal, the PayPal, I forget what it's called, PayPal Website Standards or something like that. But the Website Standards Pro allows you to actually stay on the site and make the purchase while someone is on there. I do agree that it is a little bit of a challenge to push people off-site for payment and then bringing them back. That depends upon the product. I have myself used PayPal to purchase things many times. It's taken me off and brought me back. It's the value of the product and what I'm trying to purchase that's going to be the determinant of how much annoyance I'll take to using PayPal. You need to pay attention to the numbers. So PayPal Web Standards Pro, I believe, that allows you to stay on the site and go through the whole purchase process while it's embedded. So you control branding, you control the experience, and again, people trust you more when they're capable of staying right on your site and doing it all there, and they're not being taken to a third party to be able to do processing. Something I would look at is if your site is capable of using Stripe. Stripe allows you to do all of that right directly on the site live, traditionally using JavaScript and Ajax, I believe, so that you don't have that take off the site experience. Other tools like Gumroad allow for a pop-up, so that you're not taken fully away from the site. You kind of see a smaller pop-up, you fill in your information, and then it closes and then takes you back to the thank you checkout page where people tell you that you've made your purchase. So you have to toggle between those things, but I think I agree with you, which is that whole PayPal push to another page and then back can be cumbersome, and if you're on a slow dial-up or if you have a hiccup in the process, it can really lead to lost sales.
Thanks. And then what do you consider the best place to tell your story? On the About page, on the website, profile, and Etsy? Is there an ideal way?
Sure. On Etsy, you have the About page, and I didn't mention this earlier, so really thank you for this question. This is really important. Your About page on Etsy is really, really important. And so the one particular Etsy seller that I pulled up as a sample, I apologize to her that I'm picking on her. I don't know her, and she probably doesn't know me and isn't watching, so we'll just hope that she never sees this. But that's a horrible example of a page where the About section should really be vibrant. It should have images of the seller. It should show an image that conveys the product the brand story and conveys why you are selling these products. People want to buy into you as much as they want a product. It's a buyer journey, and the product itself is a part of that experience. And you need to really think about that whole experience of people being brought into the story, experiencing the product description and story, and then eventually having a product and continuing the buyer journey. Remember that your ultimate goal is not just to sell one product, but is to create customer advocates that then go ahead and tell your story to as many people as they can say. You want them to go and sing it praises on the mountain. So you really want to make sure that you get people to do that. And so the About page on the Etsy shop is there for that. Each product has a product description area, and you should thoroughly write out that product. Remember that Google looks for about 300 words, 200 to 300 words minimum for a page to be considered of high value. Okay. There's all kinds of debate over that, reality, but let's just say that that's the 200 to 300 words. So you want to write a story about each product that really matches that. A lot of that can be template, right? A lot of that can be used over and over again, but you need to make sure that it's unique enough that it tells the story about that product. And I was recently working with a client who is doing this for jewelry, and it turns out she sources her jewelry very uniquely. And so she's able to write the story because, in essence, each of the pieces of jewelry that she's sourcing has a unique story, and each of those is put on the product page. Of course, the brand about page is now telling the story about why she's sourcing them from these places. And together, they are a rock solid. It's like knock out of the park, to mix metaphors with baseball. But the idea is that it does a really great job of saying, this is why I'm selling these products of these particular jewelers, and each jeweler is telling the inspiration for why these products were created, and voila, they mesh together well, and people are buying exponentially more product now that there's a story associated with it. So use the product description pages for the story of the product. Use an about page. If you're on Shopify, just create a page that's about us. And then, of course, if you're on Amazon Handmade or otherwise, you're going to have an Amazon seller page. If you have your own website, you're going to have an about page that you create for that.
Great. Thank you, Ray. That's all the questions we have today. Thank you, everyone, for participating.